Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of AKMMA podcast. I'm your host, AK Adam. I'm here to talk some fun MMA fights with you. We've got yet another, crazy week going on here in the MMA world. It's been a little bit of a hiatus for me. I've not made an episode like this in a couple of weeks. I was busy with my other two jobs, and I've got another podcast. So this one's just been a little bit on the wayside at the moment, but one of my jobs is coming to the end, mowing yards. Obviously, winter's coming, so that's basically over with at the moment. So this should be a little bit of a more regular thing, and like I said, it should be a weekly thing going from here on out. So for today, we've got the preview of tonight's fights. It's Jacare versus Jan Blachowicz. I believe I'm saying that right. In the main event, we've got the co-main of Shogun Rua, Paul Craig. Some interesting news came out recently. Shogun announcing that he's got 2 fights left, this and then one more after. So this is going to be an interesting fight for him. Can he end on a nice streak? Or is Paul Craig, one of those guys that's on the rise, going to keep going up the ranks? We'll see. I'm looking forward to that one. Charles Oliveira, Jared Gordon is the third fight there. The rest of the card really isn't stacked too hard with too many names. The opening bout is Wellington Turman, Marcus Perez. Perez is somebody I've been pretty high on. Both guys obviously still looking to get some more experience, especially in the UFC, under their belt. So that is not one that has necessarily a ton of, contendership on the line necessarily. But Perez specifically, I think if he wins this in dynamic fashion, he could certainly be on his way up into that, ranked area. And, I think he can definitely do that tonight. Let's look a little bit at the prelims tonight. Sergio Moraes is the headliner of the prelims. He's a guy that always brings good fights. He's going against James Krause, who's a veteran, been around quite a while. It'll be, I think, a very technical fight between the two of them. Probably won't be super duper exciting, but it won't be boring. I promise you that, because Moraes, like I said, always brings it. He's going to tag Krause up a little bit. I'm assuming he normally is one too that gets tagged up on his own exchanges. He's not too afraid to take one to give one. So yeah, definitely be watching for that one. Another name down the prelims here, Francisco Trinaldo against Bobby Green. Both guys who have a lot of fights under their belt. Bobby Green is one that a lot of people, I think, had high hopes for at one point. Not so much anymore. Both of these guys, I don't think, really have they're not necessarily close to getting that kind of ranking or anything like that. But, these are both guys that are really talented still, and have a potential today to really, reassert themselves, if nothing else. Right below that, we've got Randy Brown coming back. He's an exciting guy. Makes some really cool knockouts happen. He's going against a guy named Warley Alves. Don't know too much about that guy. They're both still fairly young in their, UFC careers here. I think that'll be a fun one either way. We've got Renan Barão right before that. Somebody who was once touted as one of the best fighters in the UFC and obviously has been on quite a downhill since his championship level days. He's going against Douglas Silva de Andrade, who's a younger guy, has a lot of fights as well, but I think he's the more fresher and definitely, I would assume the UFC at least feels they would rather him win this, just because he's got a little bit more of a sellability. Because I don't know that there's really anybody out there that still believes Renan Barão can get to that top 10 area. I think we all assume at this point his best days are behind him. But, still definitely a fight to look out for. I believe both Brazilian. So, I'm sure that fight's going to get a lot of attention from the locals down there. Hopefully they're, I I feel like there probably will be a crowd that shows up early. You know, a lot of people in the seats for these early fights. We've got some, to start off the prelims, we've got two absolute dime pieces. Tracy Cortez in the first fight, next fight, Ariane Lipsky. Both just absolute gorgeous. And really, Lipsky specifically, I think, has a lot of talent and skills that I like to watch. And I think she's going to, it looks like, I think she's going against a debutante, Isabella de Padua. You know, I obviously don't know much about her at all, but Lipsky has shown some things for me that at least tells me she's deserving of the spot she's in. But I don't know how well she's going to do all the way in Brazil. But like I said, some good fights in here. Some beautiful ladies, if that's also something bringing to the fights. Let's go back to the main card. I want to break down each of these fights a little bit, give you my pick, and yeah, see how well I can do. Not the most, like I said earlier, not the most crazy, what's it called, like fight card itself. You know, obviously just one of the free ones. ESPN Plus, they start at 5 Eastern. The prelims do 8 Eastern for the main card. But still, plenty of good fights. I'm definitely going to be tuning in. I'm going to be at work for most of this, but that ain't going to stop me, folks. It will not stop me. I will be watching a little bit. All right, so the first fight, we got Marcus Perez Turman. Like I said earlier, Perez is a guy that I really think has a lot of, not necessarily star power. I don't see that side of him as much, but, you know, you can become a star just simply by taking people out emphatically, and he's one of those guys that I think can take quick work, especially out of a guy like Turman here. I expect him to get it done first round. I just don't think the other guy's on his level. I'm gonna, you know, simple as that. The next one, Antonio Arroyo and Andre Muniz. I'm not gonna try that one again. It's about as close as I'll get on that, I think. Anyways, for this fight, you know, I'm not too familiar with either of these guys, honestly. Arroyo 9-2, Andres at 18-4. So literally, he's got double the fights and basically a similar record. Literally the exact same record if you just, you know, were to divide his by 2. You know, I don't like to just look at records when I don't really know the guys. But, you know, Muniz has obviously twice the fights. It's a lot more of a, you know, base. He's probably a little bit more comfortable in the cage. But, you know, Arroyo here, he's somebody that I don't think is going to take this opportunity for granted. He's, you know, on the main card of a card like this in Brazil. You know, I think he ekes it out. I think it'll be a decision. But I'm definitely going to have to go with Arroyo there. Let's go up to the next one. We got Cowboy Oliveira versus Jared Gordon. I'm a big Flash Gordon fan here. Oliveira's had some very controversial, I'm not sure what to call it, you know, news, I guess you could call it. I don't think there was ever a full-on conviction, because if there was, I don't believe he'd still be in the UFC. He had a little bit of I think it was a domestic abuse rumor. Like I said, I don't think anything actually was, you know, convicted. I don't think he was convicted for anything, but, you know, that's not somebody I like to get behind. And he's also not a guy that I think has much of a future as far as a contender goes either. You know, he's really good at finding submissions. He's a veteran. He always brings it. I'm sure the fight will be great. The stare down was great. They were up at each other's face, forehead to forehead. But Jared Gordon's not somebody that is going to be fazed by anybody. You know, veteran, super scary knockout guy, which I don't think Oliveira really is. You just got to watch out, you know, make sure your jiu-jitsu's on point to not get caught in one of those weird transitions into a submission, because, you know, Oliveira's slick. But I'd like to see, I think Gordon, as long as he can maintain it on the feet, he'll be able to find a finish. I'm going to go second round with that one. But this one to me is like pretty much the closest one for me on this card. The next one's also pretty close. Paul Craig, Shogun Rua. Obviously with that news from Rua earlier this week saying this is his second to last fight, it kind of raises that question of how, determined is this guy. Paul Craig, to me, is a guy who brings it every single time. He's never not intense in the fight and before the fight. And, I just feel like mindset-wise, it's going to be a real factor here because Paul Craig is somebody who I respect immensely, specifically for his, mindset going into the fight and just, his focus. He just never seems shook no matter what's going down in the fight. And he's been on a pretty good run so far in the UFC, and I definitely think he's somebody that I'm hoping anyway, and I do believe there's a potential for him to get towards that title. As of right now, I don't think he's anywhere close to like somebody like Santos or, Anthony Smith. I think he is like a level or two below those title contenders. But I just think that, because of where he's at in his career compared to Shogun, I think he's probably been, the harder trainer and just the fresher guy. He's younger, bigger. I don't know if he didn't look super huge at the weigh-in, so maybe he's not super, size-wise, doesn't have that much more than Shogun. But I just think that athletically he'll use it a lot better and find a way to get a decision here because neither guy to me is too much of a finisher at the moment, so I definitely think decision in that one. The last fight, super exciting fight. If you guys don't tune in to this freaking main event tonight, I don't know if I could call you an MMA fan, honestly. This is like, number one, Jacare moving up to light heavyweight, right? His first fight there. He may have fought there before the UFC, I want to say, or maybe his start of UFC. I'm pretty sure he has at least a little bit of, I guess practice isn't the right word, but he's at least had fights before in light heavyweight. So this isn't like his first fight ever there. And I'm sure, this is a similar weight to what he, trains at, fights at, whatever, outside of camps, He's definitely a middleweight that's not going to have trouble moving up, I think. But Jan is somebody that's like been around light heavyweight. He's a big guy. He's got a lot of power. He's obviously had some really exciting finishes lately. He knocked out Rockhold, thankfully for all of us. I'm pretty sure 99% of fans were hoping that would be the case there. So yeah, Jan and Jacare both, I think, will bring their A games. I really think that Jan just has at least he has the upper hand and more of the aspects of the fight. I don't think that we're going to see only standing. I don't think we're going to see, a 90% ground game with Jacare controlling it, I do think Jacare has the better ground game, but I think he'll struggle to be able to get it there and keep it there. Jan's just going to be, I think, really lowering his hips, making sure the takedown doesn't get completed, and just, keep himself out of danger. Similar to that fight with, that Cowboy Oliveira fight, another guy who's just dangerous on the ground. Obviously, we've seen Jacare use his stand-up a lot more in recent fights. So it's not necessarily like he can't win this fight on the feet, but I just don't see it happening just because I don't think he's going to be as quick. And Jan just seems, as far as boxing, his boxing's just a lot cleaner, I think. So that's where I'm going. We're going with Jan. Do I have I don't think this is going to the judges, but I don't think it'll be early. Both guys are super, super tough. I'm going to go with like third round, Jan, TKO. He's just going to wear Jacare down. I just don't see a world where Jacare wins this because I don't know. This is more of me thinking Jan is basically ready for a title shot. He wins this one. Don't give him anything else. Please, please, please. He before this fight, after the Rockhold knockout, feel like he could have deserved the fight then. Obviously, that's not something I don't think Jones is necessarily interested in yet. But if he gets another finish over Jacare, I could definitely see, that conversation happening. And we still don't have John Jones fight news. So maybe a win here gets him that fight. We will see. So that's gonna wrap up tonight's fights. A little preview there. We're gonna move into now. We're gonna review some of the fight cards over the last few weeks. Since I haven't been here to kind of give you my thoughts and I'll give you a little bit of my thoughts of what I was thinking heading into the fight. So Zabit, we'll go back to the Zabit card just last weekend. He was facing Calvin Kattar in Russia. It was the main event, but it was only 3 rounds. A lot of controversy surrounding the fact that it was only 3 rounds. I get it. I don't have a problem with it because of, it was like literally 2 weeks out or maybe even less from them having to change the main event. Volkov was supposed to be fighting JDS, I believe. And, when the main event falls out on that shorter notice and they fill in Greg Hardy instead of JDS, which is crazy to me how they ever thought that would be a competitive fight, which it wasn't terribly, uncompetitive, but it wasn't the greatest fight. And if you didn't have Volkov winning, you're on crack. I mean, honestly. But anyway, so like I said, back to the Zabit thing. The 3-round fight definitely, I'm pretty sure most people would think that would have favored Zabit. He got the decision, not too shocked there. That's kind of how his MO, he's really technical, doesn't take too many risks, doesn't put himself out there too much, just does what he needs to do to get it done. We've seen a couple of different times now where it seems like he's starting to fade towards the end of the fight, and a lot of people believe that Kattar would have ended up winning this had the fight been, a 5-round main event. But I would side with the UFC here to, keep it at 3 rounds. Like they're 90% of their camp has been practicing for 3 rounds. It's 2 extra rounds is a big difference. The camps would have been a lot different. You can't really change things up in those last couple weeks to really, be ready for that. And, I like the guys that are ready for anything, 3 or 5. I don't give a shit. I'm sure Kattar wanted the 5, but it's just, it's not necessarily fair to both guys. Like they both should get an option to say, no, we're going to keep it here, right? Unless both wanted 5, then just keep it at 3. I'm fine with it. But anyway, so yeah, Zabit got the decision win. Not too surprised there. That's who I would have had, especially keeping it 3. I still think I would have gone with Zabit if it was 5. Just because, even if he does gas, I don't think he's one of those guys that's going to be completely dead by the end of the fight. And his lack of stamina would have just done him in completely. Kattar certainly could have found ways to finish it towards the end of the fight. I still, 3 or 5, I still would have gone with Zabit just because I think he's the more technical, well-rounded fighter, smarter fighter almost. And really, it's a shame that we didn't get the 5, especially in Boston. It would have been interesting to see if Kattar could have switched that result. But, both guys are still fine. Zabit obviously is close to that title talk. Kattar here, I think he's a couple of fights away from really getting to that top 5-10 area. But by no means do I expect him to be, falling down the ranks far. I think he'll be right back with a win in his next fight, honestly. So looking forward to seeing both of their next fights. Let's go to that Greg Hardy, Alexander Volkov co-main. It was a 3-round decision. It wasn't like a blowout, but it was a pretty easy handling from Volkov. We saw a pretty similar fight with him and Derek Lewis. The only difference is that Derek Lewis actually found the punch in the last 10 seconds of that fight. Craziest maybe comeback knockout. I think it's statistically the biggest comeback knockout in the UFC's history, just because in that fight, Derek Lewis had landed, very few shots, took a ton from Volkov, and then just finds that one knockout punch and finished him literally with like 5 seconds left. The reason why I thought coming into this that Volkov would be so easily favored is just because of the reason I don't think Greg Hardy's necessarily as like Derek Lewis really isn't even that technical. The difference between them though is just an IQ thing to me almost. It's like Derek Lewis, even though a lot of times he's gassed, he knows the perfect times to throw those combos to really kind of disrupt what they're doing, and he almost plays a good bait role in making you think he's a little bit more hurt than he is, so you rush in a little wild, and that's when he catches a lot of guys. Greg Hardy is still real young in the game. He just doesn't have as much of that, fighting under his belt to really know exactly when to attack and what, combos to throw. He doesn't have as much of the mind game, so, I just never saw really much of a way Greg Hardy won this, and I'm glad Volkov did win it. I don't know how much longer we're going to do this Hardy, experiment. I don't see it going much further, although his stand-up looks decent. He's still going to get destroyed by some wrestlers, and there's, a decent amount in that heavyweight division with guys like Curtis Blades, guys like him that are just going to take him down, elbow him in the head, and he's just not going to be able to get up. So, anyways, we're going to move on. Not too many more super exciting fights from last weekend's card. Danny Roberts got a big KO in the second round. Ed Herman got another big win over, I believe, another Russian. The Russians really didn't have a very good day. Rocco Martin also beat Ramazan Ameev. Ameev was a guy, I didn't think he'd cruise to this victory, but I'm actually pretty shocked Rocco won it. Rocco's just not a guy that I haven't seen him develop like I thought we would. He seems to bring us a very similar fight every time, and somebody eventually is going to figure it out, I think. But congrats to him. He's definitely, a guy that a lot of people recognize, and if he can keep going with some wins here, he could definitely get his name out there and move on up. I'm not going to touch on the prelims on that one. We're going to keep moving. I'm trying to keep this around at half an hour. We got about 7 minutes left, so I'm going to go over UFC 244, the BMF title fight, main event. As most of you know now, Jorge won. It was sadly a terrible ending to the fight. There was a bad cut on the top of Nate Diaz's eye. The blood was running into the eye. As far as the doctor goes, I'm not surprised he stopped it. I really wish he wouldn't have. Maybe at least let it go into that round. If it gets worse in that round, that's when you can cut it, whatever. Nate Diaz is never going to be somebody that's going to complain that you should have stopped it based on his cuts or something. Like, he doesn't want it to. He wants to keep going. Jorge wants to keep going. The ref wanted it to keep going. Like, everybody knows that it could have kept going based on the toughness of both guys, especially Nate Diaz here. But I just still don't have much of a gripe, I guess, with the stoppage, just because, the gash really was pretty bad, and I just don't see the fight changing. Everybody said, oh, well, Nate Diaz was coming on. Nah. To me, Jorge wasn't slowing down. He controlled 90% of the fight, and even when Nate got him in a little bit of trouble, the clinch was there every time, and Jorge won the clinch every time. The result wasn't going to change to me, so congrats to Jorge. The Rock putting the belt around his waist. I really enjoyed The Rock's little walkout, and he did the, can you smell what The Rock is cooking? That whole thing. That was pretty fun. I'm not one of the people that disliked the whole pageantry to it all, the fake belt. I'm down for it all. Just whatever gets more eyes to the fight, whatever gets these guys paid more, I'm all for it. So let's move to the co-main. A really, really good fight, back and forth. And this really, I thought was a huge fight for Darren Till. A lot of people had already written him off. He's only got 2 damn losses, guys. He's got 2 damn losses. Tyron Woodley, like one of the greatest welterweight champions we've ever had. And then obviously the fight after was a little bit more of a letdown. But I don't, especially now that Masvidal just beat Nate Diaz, I don't think that loss really looks too bad anymore either. So him moving up, which is something a lot of people were probably hoping for anyways, out of Darren Till, him to move up to 185. His first fight gets Kelvin Gastelum. A lot of people were thinking, myself included, that this wasn't a great fight for Darren Till. I figured he'd have the reach. He's also obviously good at being the long-rangey fighter. We saw that against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Him winning that really, to me, solidifies him as a top-level striker. And Gastelum here is also a really good striker. So I figured this would be a good fight, close fight like it was. But Darren Till, I thought, really there's one round I thought could have gone either way, but the rest of the fight I thought was Darren Till's. He looked really, really good, really composed, which is funny considering some of the comments he made. He's been very, very honest about him leading up to fights, being very, very, anxious almost and nervous, not completely sure of himself. We've heard a lot of these fighters go through similar things where, they have some sort of doubts or they're just, want to back out right before they're going out there. None of us fans have any idea the kind of emotions and adrenaline going through them as they step out. So, number one, I'm just really, happy to see guys like Darren Till who aren't afraid to come out and talk about stuff like this, because really it just, I think, has to add to the respect aspect. Like, how could you not respect a guy that's willing to open up his faults, his insecurities, and tell it like it is, and still be a guy who's not afraid to fight anybody, really. He's called out Romero, and then he's kind of dancing back and forth with this Yoel Romero fight here now. I'd like to see the fight. I think that would be absolute fireworks. I don't think that's going to a decision, but I'm not sure if he really does want it, because it seems like he's more been calling out Rob Whittaker, and Whittaker's been coming back at him too. So I feel like that's the fight they'll make, and it looks like Izzy Romero might be a fight that they're working out. So I don't know exactly as far as what the, moving forward, what they'll do with the division. There's not necessarily a real highlight, like, we got to see this fight for the title. Like, Izzy was waiting on Costa. Costa getting hurt is pretty bad for this division for me right now. It seems like the one most people are clamoring for is Yoel, coming off of 2 losses to Whittaker, and he just lost to Costa. How do we justify Yoel fighting for the belt? He's had his chances. I don't think he's going anywhere if he fights like a Darren Till, or, if Romero can get another win or two, that's fine. But I just don't see why so many people are, like, trying to give him to Izzy. It just doesn't make sense at all. And I really think that's, I wouldn't say an easy fight, but the way Romero fights, I think, is just going to be an easy night for Stylebender, sorry. Anyways, let's keep it moving. Enough talk about the Darren Till and Kelvin there and all the middleweights. That's something the UFC is going to have to figure out. Let's go on down to welterweight, where Stephen Thompson got a big win over Vicente Luque. Luque was a young guy who always brings, exciting fights. He gets hit way more than he needs to, but that's just so he can get on the inside. And he had a couple of times where he rocked Stephen Thompson, but this was just a signature win for Thompson. This is how he wins fights. He just stays crisp in his movement. It didn't seem like he slowed down almost ever in this fight. He's just got such a good gas tank, crisp boxing and just karate, and just stays on the outside and just doesn't let you get inside where you can do real damage. So I was just that fight was so good, and I'm just happy for a great guy like Stephen Thompson to get that. Wonder Boy is a guy that as long as he's in that top 10, you gotta be looking out for him because he could definitely rise up pretty quickly, I think. Another guy who's also in a pretty similar situation, Derek Lewis right below him here. Blagoy Ivanov and him went at it. It was another really good fight. This one was probably, as far as the judges goes, this was like the closest one to really tell who the heck even won this. I wasn't sure in the moment. I was hoping for Derek Lewis, and I gave him the lean at the end of it, but I was like, dude, I could see it for Blagoy, I guess. I don't know. I thought Derek Lewis overall looked crisper, but I thought Blagoy had some of the bigger moments that could have stolen some rounds, right? And he had some takedowns that could have, just depending on the judges, could have really changed the result there. But, Derek Lewis, man, I just love the guy. Every time he gets on the mic, he says something hilarious or just outrageous. So I'm glad he got the win. Hopefully he doesn't go anywhere for quite a while. And, maybe he gets another big win. He gets one more. He could definitely be in that talks. Francis Ngannou is still out there looking for a fight. Obviously their first fight didn't go well, but I don't think Francis is going to let that happen again if they do fight again, and I'd like to see it. Although if it goes the same way, we're all going to be pissed, but I can't see it going that way. It's got to be a knockout. Somebody, that's just one of those fights that how did it go that way? That just doesn't make sense. But yeah, so Derek Lewis definitely, 2 more wins I think could be back up to where he was in that title talk. As obviously he faced Cormier, and Cormier is on his last fight, so it's not like Derek Lewis has a loss for the champion. So whatever champion is going to be there when Derek Lewis is ready. That could be a really good fight. But obviously he's got to do some more winning first. I don't think that a win over Blagoy really does it. But he's right there, man. I don't know what he's – let me see if they got the ranking here. Doesn't look like it. But he's got to be in that top 10, man. He's been around, and he's taken care of a lot of these rising prospects. Next, last on the main card, incredible fight, man. Gregor Gillespie, Kevin Lee, first round was just fireworks back and forth. They both looked so fast, so crisp. This is just what high-level mixed martial arts is about, man. Just, it was just a really great technical, high athleticism fighting, and, there was a little bit of decisions back and forth. They were getting a feel for each other while also still, going for it, if you will. And Kevin Lee just found the perfect combination when Gregor was a little bit off balance. He kind of, I think it was a right hook he set him up with and just blasted him with a left high kick. And, this guy was out immediately. He did like a little T-pose into the cage and just fell back asleep, and it was pretty brutal of a knockout. And Gregor, obviously being an undefeated fighter before this, it sucks a little bit. But also Kevin Lee, who went up to 170, came back down. He hasn't really found his home. He somebody that a lot of us, I think, have some high hopes for, but hasn't really panned out recently, although he hasn't taken any easy fights. For God's sakes, he could have been an interim champion at one point if he would have beaten Tony Ferguson, but he came in with staph infection to that fight. So although it was a good performance from Tony, he got the win, he got the belt, but I'd like to think that fight would have been a lot closer if Kevin Lee would have been full-on healthy. Either way, Kevin Lee, no matter what division, 55 or 70, that he wants to pick, I think he probably will stay at lightweight for now. There's a lot bigger fights at lightweight as well, so I think it's in his interest to stay at 155. But he's definitely still somebody I see contending in this top 5-ish, top 10-ish range, just because he's just got so much talent. He's with a new crew with GSP and Firas Zahabi. Iron molds iron, whatever that saying is. He's got the perfect training now, which he's been kind of searching for since his coach got, killed himself. That couldn't have been easy on anybody that was close to this flawless guy. Not somebody I'm super familiar with, but every fighter that fought under him, had a really, really close connection with. And finding the right coach for your fighter is obviously a huge thing. A lot of different fighters, I think, have talked about this. I'm not sure. I think it's either the Anik podcast with Florian or Michael Bisping's podcast. But one of them talks a lot about how you can't get the most out of your fighter unless you have their full trust. And, that's obviously something that Kevin Lee had before. Hopefully he's found it now. It looks like it. I mean, like I said, I was just blown away by how he came out, how he looked. And hopefully that's the home that he'll be able to stay in for quite a while. I'm not exactly sure who they could match him up with next. I'm sure it's going to be something juicy, and I can't wait for that. But yeah, man, I'm looking forward to today's fights. Saturday, 5 p.m. Eastern, guys. Tune in. Jacare, Jan Blachowicz, the main event. That fight is gonna be good. And I promise you, if you guys don't watch it, I'm gonna be disappointed in you. But anyways, if you guys have any questions for the next episode or anything, you can always hit me up on Twitter at KillaKellerFlow. But yeah, anyways, I appreciate you guys tuning in. This will, like I said at the start of the show here, this is going to be a little bit more of a, I'm going to keep this on the schedule. I don't know exactly what day of the week I will be dropping this, but I'm going to get it back on a weekly schedule. I'm hoping to do like maybe Monday or Tuesday, just so when I recap the fights, I can be a little bit fresher with it. So yeah, I appreciate anybody, whoever's tuning in. Hopefully you could drop a like and subscribe for your boy. I'd really appreciate it. But yeah, hit me up on Twitter. I love debating some of this stuff. I don't have too much emotional connection to many fighters, so I like to keep it really subjective and not bring my emotional ties to anybody into my debates, especially with somebody like Greg Hardy. I really, really don't like the guy, but I still have to admit he's been getting better, stuff like that. If you want to debate, if you got, a hot take or something, come to me, man. I love talking about this stuff. But anyways, I appreciate you guys listening. I'll be back here Monday or Tuesday, and we'll see you next time.